Greetings, all. I wanted to take a moment today to come on and talk about what the underworld is and what the underworld isn't. And more specifically, to speak about what the Venus sky dancer underworld is versus the mythological underworld that we have like an understanding of out in the collective. Because I think in our modern society, in our Western world, we have connotated the underworld negatively, like as it being a hell realm or a realm that is scary, or it's a realm that's ruled by dark beings or gremlins or, the dark mother. There are so many negative connotations in mythology um, about the underworld. It being the land of the dead or a place that you can't come back from. I have sometimes heard people mention, like if I work with the underworld, am I calling in something that I don't want? And so, all of those things, those connotations can be true from like a mythological perspective or a story perspective, most especially in the Western world. And I want to take a minute to talk about that because really from a shamanic cosmology, right? From a very ancient cosmology, the underworld wasn't actually all those scary things. And it was connotated later as those scary things um, through the Hellenized myths or through the Greek myths that really went on to demonize the feminine. And so, from a shamanic cosmology, the underworld is the realm of the feminine. It is the realm of the mother. It is the realm of soul. So we have in shamanic cosmology, the upper world is the realm of spirit. It's more masculine. It's more transcendental. And then we've got the middle world, of course, which is here where we all live, this kind of mundane plane. And then the underworld is the realm of the mother, of soul, right? And when we travel to the underworld, essentially what we're doing is kind of planting ourselves in the soil, burying ourselves in a sense, in order to absorb the nutrients of the underworld. I'm going to add a piece of writing to this that makes it a little bit more clear or a little more linear, just so that I'm just simply filling in some context. So, when we work with Venus, we use the Inanna myth, but this myth is actually a story motif that is repeated again and again and again, right? And it was created through Venus. We know this. There's historical record that talks about how the Babylonian priests were watching Venus, and then they were creating these myths based on the planetary movements, right? And then that's the oldest known myth. And then that myth is repeated again and again through Isis, through the Passion of Demeter, which later became the Passion of Mary, Mother Mary, who lamented Jesus's death on the cross, right? And so in Inanna's mythology, Inanna descends through 7 gates, right? And then she arrives in the underworld. At each of the gates, she's asked to give one of her royal me. I love this, me, right? Like the things we think make up who we are. They are literally called the me. And the royal me are royal vestments of power, right? The things that we feel safe, that make us feel safe. There's this kind of like illusions of safety and security and ego and identity, the things we kind of wrap ourselves in that cloak us so that we are prepared to go into the outside world. And as we grow, as we are conditioned, we heap more and more of these, or collect more and more of these metaphorical needs, and place them in our field or on our body. And they kind of become enmeshed with our persona, and it becomes difficult to know what is a royal me that's going to be shed on the descent side of the cycle, and what is actually just us, the innocence of who we are, the essence self, right? And so Inanna, she descends to the underworld. At each gate, she is taking off one of the royal meats. And then finally, at the last gate, she is welcome into the underworld. And in the underworld, a whole drama plays out, right? And it's like a mythic drama, or like we might think of like the comedies of the Greek that are tragedies, right? Like the great dramas that they put on that were actually serving a psycho-spiritual purpose. Like they didn't really have in olden times, based on the way that we have evolved, they were far more tribal and communal, so far more externally oriented. And so they needed the passion of these different plays, these tragedies and comedies, to help them with their psycho-spiritual processes. As we've evolved and individuated over the centuries, we have been able to become more and more internally oriented, and we need these kind of passion plays less and less, right? However, I think that there is something really beautiful and extremely feminine about engaging with these older psychic processes, as they are very useful for helping us with the individuation process. They're helpful for clarifying, distilling, and clearing out. So when Inanna arrives in the underworld, she is met by Ereshkigal, her dark sister. And from a mythopoetic perspective, her dark sister represents her. It's another facet of Inanna. It's a facet of Inanna she has exiled, abandoned, betrayed. They are they're fragments of Inanna's soul or shadow or unconscious. And so she comes into contact with Ereshkigal. Ereshkigal is at once, she is in labor and she is writhing in pain from the labor, which is part of why Inanna goes down in the first place. She hears her sister moaning in pain. And if you think about it from a mythopoetic perspective, often it is our psyche, the disowned parts of our psyche, that call out to us to come down, right? To come and meet them, to come and reclaim them, to come and integrate them. And they cause pain to us. And so when Inanna comes, Ereshkigal is so incensed that Inanna has come into her realm that she slays her. So there's this simultaneous death and birth motif happening at the same time, right? And so Ereshkigal is giving birth to something new that is not quite born yet, and she slays Inanna. And this metaphorically is like an ego annihilation, right? It's an annihilation of all of the things that are untrue about our lives, all of the false investments of safety and power we've invested in. We have the opportunity to give them up in the underworld. And so as this drama is playing out and there's this simultaneous death and birth happening, there are these beings that Inanna has instructed to follow her down, right? They're like little helper beings of Inanna. And they come down, and Inanna has been slayed, and she's hung on a meat hook in the myth. And they find Ereshkigal on the floor, writhing in pain. And so they don't immediately go to Inanna, which I've always found interesting until I understood the deeper messages. They go to Ereshkigal, the dark sister, the disowned part, right? And they start mirroring her pain back to her with radical empathy. And so she's saying, "Oh, my pain, my pain." And then they say, "Oh, your pain, your pain. Oh, my lament, my lament." And they say back to her, "Oh, your lament, right? And they continue to shower her, witness her. The witnessing is an important, with the eyes of love, this radical empathy and compassion, until finally she gives birth and then releases Inanna from the meat hook. And it is thought to be through this act of radical empathy that Inanna gets released through the meat hook. And then they turn their attention to Inanna and they sprinkle her with the water and bread of life 60 times. And so we know that there are two things happening in the underworld. There is this simultaneous death and rebirth, and this transformation or transmutation that is happening through the modality of love, right? And so the underworld is not a scary place. It is a deeply healing place. It is not the underworld that causes our fears. It is not the underworld that causes our pain. It is not the underworld that causes our suffering, right? It's everything that's happened in the upper world that causes our pain and our suffering. The underworld is the nourishing realm of the feminine. And like this idea that it is the realm of the dark feminine is false in the sense that the feminine is one, right? We are all facets of the feminine, from dark to light to everything across the entire spectrum. We are going down to the realm of the mother to be loved and embraced by her. You know, one of the really wonderful motifs and actual magical substances that I love to work with in my own personal practice is the substance of ash, because ash is a transmuted substance, right? And I often think about how ash is sprinkled on soil and how it enriches or fertilizes soil and allows a new thing to grow. And when we go through the Venus underworld experience, when we go down and open so deeply and allow ourselves to be loved so deeply, it causes us to become a new thing. And one of the things or themes that we work with in the underworld is that very theme of opening to love. It is, I can't tell you how many women I work with who are phenomenal caretakers, who know how to caretake everyone around them. They are so attuned, right? They are, they attuned to the finest need, so compassionate and empathetic to other people. But when it comes to opening to love for themselves, there are kind of like trapdoors in place that doesn't allow the love to come in. And it has been the most deeply healing part of my underworld experience, to in the wake of something in the upper world happening that um, had me flee to the underworld for refuge. It was the experience of opening to love, to saying yes to every kind thing someone wanted to do for me. I was given that prompt to say yes, to open to love. And when I did, what I realized was like, oh, I didn't realize how scarce I was. Somebody wanted to cook me a meal and do something kind for me. And I would say, oh, you can just get us a frozen lasagna or order us a pizza. Like I didn't say yes, I would appreciate being nourished by you, right? Someone would tell me they liked my shirt or thought I looked nice, and I'd say, oh, it was only $5 and I got it on sale. Or, oh, I didn't think I was having a nice hair day. Like these ways that I would make myself smaller in the face of love. And over time, in this practice, as I was being nourished and re-put together and fertilized and made a new thing, in the underworld, in the safety, in the embrace of the mother, in that deep nourishing soil down, by the roots, in the kind of mycelial layer, right, is where we go for this kind of like deep healing. Oops, I'm sorry. As I was doing that, at the same time, I was opening to love. And about 9 months into this practice, what I realized was I was out walking one day and that it was a beautiful sunny day. So I noticed that right away. And I had been developing a new connection to the sun in general. And so I appreciated the sun and I felt the sun on my skin and it felt kind of like a kiss or an embrace. And then a tree was kind of like waving its arms and like in the breeze. And I was like, it almost felt to me like it landed in my system, like the tree was waving or saying hello. And I just had this like ecstatic connection with all of life, right? With this sense of being part of a huge interconnected web of life that I belong to, a sense of belonging, right? And this deep connection to a living source of love that I could never be separated from is what was seated inside of this practice of opening to love. And so, yes, the underworld is like the goddesses. It is paradoxical. The most distilled form of the goddess is paradox. And so, is it true that, in the underworld, we will be reclaiming some of our exiled parts? And that's sort of where the graveyard motif comes in, or the death motif comes in. From a psycho-spiritual perspective, those kind of, death themes come from visiting like the graveyard of what we have turned away from in our lives, the things that we haven't wanted to look at, things we've betrayed, things that, are calling out like a Rishkagel for integration, right? So that when something new is integrated, we become a new thing. Does that make sense? So, and then that the transmutation happens through the medium of love and compassion. That's the only medium real transformation happens through, in my perspective. It comes from a deep sense of love and approval for the parts of us we once thought maybe too ugly to look at, right? And so I want to dispel any myths, that the underworld is a scary place, or that working with the underworld could potentially call in an underworld experience. We are ritually, metaphorically working with the underworld so that, when a time comes, because we're human, right, that we may need the refuge of the underworld, we have the tools to meet it, right? And there is deep healing that can be done just on the ritual metaphorical level, like when we take ourselves willingly to this realm and work with exiled parts and bring some of them home, there is deep transformation that can happen. But no, we are not working with any deities. We are not calling in an underworld experience. The underworld itself is not hell. It is not bad. That is a manifestation of our collective mother wound to believe that. Right. And I'm not saying you shouldn't believe it, because that's the messaging out in the world. I'm saying that, part of the deep alchemy of the underworld is actually healing that split within us, that split that exiles the dark as something bad, when in reality, it was just the ancients who were demonizing the feminine. There is an interesting mirror that emerges when we look at our relationship with the underworld, and then we look at how we demonize ourselves, or we demonize parts of us. It's like, the demonization of the underworld is an external mirror to how we treat the quote unquote darker parts of ourselves, right? So I wanted to really clear up and dispel any myths about the underworld. For people who have been interested, who have felt the call, who have been catalyzed by the idea, but are also, they've only ever heard it talked about one way. So I wanted to offer the deeper mythopoetic, the deeper esoteric meaning of the underworld and why we work with it. Like I said, it is a realm that is extraordinarily healing, nourishing. It's the place of homecoming that puts us back together. We use the medium of love in the underworld, right? It is an embrace. It is a place of refuge and safety. along with being an alchemical crucible. All of my work is gentle. All of my work is titrated and slow. And so I want to know, I want to include this information in my invitation to Underworld. There has been a reason, and I'll talk about it during our first call, that I have slowly revealed pieces of the Underworld in a specific way, where I have presented the Underworld in a very stark and very westernized contrast. And now I want to reveal sort of the deeper esoteric meaning of the Underworld, the deeper psycho-spiritual, mythic meaning of the Underworld. So if you have any questions, of course, reach out, and we can't wait to get started on May 11th. Thank you.